Tonight, Victoria records a surge in the number of people testing positive to COVID-19 as the Premier warns of on-the-spot fines for those flouting self-isolation rules.
Follow the rules, do the right thing, keep your distance, stay at home.
Also tonight, thousands of jobs on ice as retail giants, including Myer and Cotton On, prepare to shut their doors. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson heads into isolation with coronavirus. And horse racing is back on track and trying to ride out the crisis.
It's not easy, but that's okay. We've got the rubber gloves and we're all sorted.
Good evening, Mary Gearin with ABC News. Victoria has recorded its largest one-day jump in confirmed cases of coronavirus. Over the past 24 hours, 111 people have tested positive, taking the total in the state to 685. Those affected are aged from just 8 to 88. Thankfully, there were no new deaths recorded in the state overnight, but the national toll has risen to 14 after a fourth resident of a Sydney aged care home died. From midnight tonight, all travellers returning from overseas to Victoria will be forced to go into quarantine for 2 weeks. And the state government has announced on-the-spot fines for those people who are ignoring self-isolation rules. Our reporter James Hancock begins our coverage.
Melbourne life is slowing down as coronavirus infection escalates.
90+% of new cases are either people who have travelled overseas or the close contacts of those who've travelled overseas.
Confirmed cases have been relentlessly climbing, but Victoria has been hit with the biggest increase yet, up 111 overnight to a total of 685 infections. In a desperate bid to keep numbers down, cruise ships in Port Phillip Bay will only be allowed to refuel and stock up.
No chance they're getting off any of those ships.
This was St Kilda yesterday. Today the sand was clear.
Great to see. This should have never occurred yesterday.
Port Phillip Council says its beaches are closed. Sunbaking is off limits, but people can still walk, run or take a quick dip.
As long as I'm not interacting with anyone, I don't really see the problem.
But police were ordering everyone off this morning.
People are really confused. There's lots of mixed messages.
Unfortunately, they didn't quite get the message that there was a few nuances around the beach closure. That has now been rectified.
Adding to the uncertainty, Mornington Peninsula Council says its beaches are totally off limits at the request of the state government. But people were there today and the council closure differs to what the government is saying.
Do the right thing, our beaches stay open, but most importantly, you save lives.
On the Surf Coast, beachgoers soaked up the sun at Point Addis, where parking space was limited. The state's chief health officer slamming such actions on Twitter, saying some of the behaviour today, when we're asking people to stay home, has been really crap. Those caught breaking social distancing rules in Victoria will now face on-the-spot fines of more than $1,600 for individuals or almost $10,000 for businesses. The fines apply to failing to self-isolate for 14 days after arriving from overseas, organising or attending a mass gathering, a wedding of over 5 people, a funeral of more than 10, and organising an auction. Bourke Street Mall looks a little busier than it has been in recent days. So while the state government says stay home if you can, it seems a spot of city shopping is still too tempting for some. The government has again flagged that tougher restrictions are coming.
There will be a stage 3. It will come at the appropriate time.
In the race against the clock to control the pandemic. James Hancock, ABC News, Melbourne.
Well, in just a few hours, tough new quarantine restrictions come into force for all travellers arriving in Australia. They'll be confined to a hotel room for 2 weeks, guarded by police and Defence Force personnel and threatened with fines or jail if they don't comply. It's the harshest measure yet from the government to stop coronavirus cases from being brought in from overseas. Here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
The steady stream of weary travellers is dwindling by the day.
1.5 metres or 4 feet to help stop the spread of infection.
And from midnight tonight, there'll be no quick dash home.
I think every return traveller is a significant risk.
Hotels, motels, caravan parks and student housing turned into makeshift quarantine centres amid concerns 2/3 of new coronavirus cases are coming in from overseas.
We will have potentially thousands of people in hotel rooms under self-isolation.
The force of law will be there to stop people leaving that hotel and there will be fines. Even imprisonment.
The cost of the 14-day stays will be picked up by the states and territories. New South Wales and Victoria up for the highest room service bills, simply given the number of flights heading into Sydney and Melbourne. The federal government will stump up for the defence personnel drafted in to help local police, ensuring travellers are confined to quarters.
Money is not the issue here, but I think the benefits to health, the benefits to all of us far outweigh the cost.
This is our room.
Saqib Awan and his wife are already holed up in hotel quarantine after their cruise ship docked in Hawaii and they were flown back to Australia.
I do recognise, first of all, that these measures are necessary.
But he's annoyed passengers on another cruise ship haven't been forced to do the same.
It's a mystery.
Once the pair finish their fortnight in Sydney, they'll head home to Darwin and another frustrating fortnight in isolation.
I would be far better off being frustrated then than being in palliative care in June or July.
Annoyance about travel now could become even more acute if the nation's airlines aren't there once the crisis eases. The federal government today announced almost $300 million to prop up smaller airlines, underwriting key routes between capital cities and regional centres.
It's not the government's intention to nationalise airlines.
National Cabinet will meet again tomorrow as leaders constantly assess whether restrictions already in place are doing enough to slow the spread of the virus. The Prime Minister is also expected to announce in coming days a third round of economic assistance, looking at helping businesses to effectively go into hibernation during the crisis and putting in place protections for tenants as they struggle to pay the rent. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
10,000 Myer workers have been stood down without pay as the department store joins the growing list of retailers choosing to shut down. It means by the end of this weekend, more than 100,000 retail employees will be without a job. Elias Kluwer reports.
Retail precincts across Australia have gone from bustling to barren.
The city is nothing.
Retail spending has plummeted, with Myer the latest casualty. The retail giant will shut up shop across the country for at least a month, leaving 10,000 people without work. David Jones says it'll stay open, but its stable of smaller fashion brands, including Country Road and Witchery, will now close too. Cotton On Group also announced today it was closing 670 stores. The retail giants now join Kathmandu, Rip Curl, Adairs, Just Jeans, Retail Food Group and Athlete's Foot in shutting its stores.
Those retailers are very, very concerned about their staff catching the coronavirus from other consumers, and most definitely they're very worried about their cash flow.
The Retail Association says Myer has been a major fixture on the retail landscape and its closure is a massive blow. And there's now a sense that smaller retailers will have to close. But many small business owners have told the ABC that they'll stay open until the government tells them to shut.
We're fortunate enough that we can still open the doors, so we try to make the best of a bad situation.
Other businesses are still unsure of how it'll pay rent if it can't open its doors.
If we are going in debt for next 6 months, it will take a year or so to cover up.
But business is booming at supermarkets. Grocery chain Coles has had to hire 7,000 new casuals and it says it needs 5,000 more.
They're coming from hospitality, they're coming from tourism, they're coming from the airlines, they're coming from high-level customer service industries and they're ready to work and we're ready to make them employed again quickly.
They will get it back up and running, but I think if we think that they're going to be up and running quickly when this is over, I think we've got to think again.
While there's a glimmer of hope for some in the short term, real recovery may be a long time coming. Elias Kluwer, ABC News, Melbourne.
Well, while across the country Australians are being told to stay home, in Queensland they've been told to go out and vote. The state is holding its local government elections today and more than 1 million Queenslanders braved polling booths under the cloud of a global pandemic. But authorities assured voters there was no health risk.
there's no risk here. We've got to remember the risk of people going to the shops is far, far higher than that.
But many were furious the elections went ahead, with some even boycotting the poll. More than 40 suspected cases of the virus have been identified on a cruise ship docked in Fremantle. The WA government has struck a deal with the Commonwealth to transfer any passengers with COVID-19 to 2 private hospitals, while the rest, all foreign nationals, will catch charter flights back to Germany.
From 7 cases to a suspected 46. The evacuation of 850 passengers on the Artania morphed from a manageable operation to a logistical nightmare.
All we want to avoid is the Sydney Harbour situation, which was a catastrophe.
Passengers are being tested for COVID-19 by WA health officials. After testing is complete, authorities will triage passengers. Those fit to fly will return to Germany on chartered flights over the next 24 to 36 hours. All passengers with COVID-19 will be transferred to 2 private hospitals, paid for by the federal government.
I had a long conversation with the Prime Minister this morning. We both understand it's very complex and very difficult, and we're both very focused on a solution.
Docked next to the Artania is the Vasco da Gama, with 800 Australians on board. 200 are from WA. They'll be transferred to Rottnest Island for 2 weeks quarantine, while the remainder will spend 14 days in isolation, most likely at a Perth hotel, before flying home to their respective states. A number of New Zealanders will be escorted to Perth Airport to catch a flight home this evening, while the state government is in talks with the British High Commission about the 30 UK citizens on the ship. In the interim, those on board are making their own fun.
Swapping passengers on the high seas while they fret about us on the news, soaking up the sun on this luxury cruise.
From several hundred metres away, Taryn Jones took the opportunity to say hi to her parents, who've been on the ship for 3 weeks.
It's as good as can be expected. People are a bit concerned about what's happening. We're kind of trying to social distance.
Yeah.
Western Australia isn't alone in its predicament. Dozens of cruise ships remain in limbo across the globe, including the MS San Dam, off the Panama coast with more than 1,700 on board. The vessel has been turned away from several South American ports. 4 passengers have died of COVID-19 and 53 have reported flu-like symptoms, along with 85 crew. Emily Peace, ABC News.
Well, in the midst of the devastating economic shutdown, some businesses are managing to hang on, but to survive, they have to adapt quickly to this new world with rules that are changing by the day. Social Affairs correspondent Norman Hermont reports.
The mat is down. The phone is in place. Time for this workout to begin.
Good morning, everybody. Here I am again.
Teddy Altree-Williams is following instructor Lindsay McGee from her living room.
Make it a bounce, if you can.
Every squat jump, twist, and push-up. She's in self-isolation, but can still get her fitness classes in.
It's something that I'm used to doing every single day, and if that was taken away from me, from a health and wellbeing perspective, it wouldn't be good.
We're nearly there. We've got 3. We've got 2.
This gym had never done anything like this before, but with Australia on virtual shutdown, this idea has taken off.
We kind of cobbled it together. We started testing it last week and we went live on Monday, and now we have 300 members.
In the new world shaped by the coronavirus, businesses are adapting to survive.
Give me 1 baby gem lettuce out as well.
2 weeks ago, this restaurant relied solely on dine-in customers.
So the carbonara and a cheeseburger at 6:30.
Like every other food business still operating, it's now takeaway only.
I'd like to continue operating and provide that opportunity for our staff, for ourselves, but also for the customers.
Innovating on the fly is something Australians do well, according to a leading management professor who says in Europe that isn't always the case.
My background is I'm from Europe, and I've seen that adaptation is much slower. For instance, some restaurants, after a couple of days, they said, well, this is not really working for us, and we don't know how to make that work.
There you go. Thank you. Enjoy. Cheers.
The new rules are adapt or disappear. Norman Hermont, ABC News.
Despite testing positive, the British Prime Minister insists he'll continue to lead his nation through the coronavirus crisis. Both Boris Johnson and his Health Secretary are in isolation with mild symptoms. But the death toll across the UK and Europe continues to rise. Europe correspondent Linton Besser reports from London.
Just hours before his diagnosis, Boris Johnson was outside number 10 applauding the UK's health workers. As the man tasked with handling the nation's crisis, he has now joined the ranks of thousands of Brits who've caught the virus.
I've taken a test that has come out positive, so I am working from home, I'm self-isolating.
The diagnosis comes as his partner, Carrie Symonds, is pregnant with their first child. Just earlier this month, Boris Johnson boasted of how he couldn't stop shaking hands.
I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody, you'll be pleased to know.
Also struck down the British Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, seen here with the PM having tea on a recent hospital visit. Boris Johnson's last audience with the Queen was via phone, and like Prince Charles, who also tested positive this week, it's been 2 weeks since he saw Her Majesty in person. Now Boris Johnson is confined to the office and flat at number 11 Downing Street, with meals left at the door. Boris Johnson will remain at the helm, but should his symptoms worsen and he feels unable to continue, the top job will fall to his Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab. The COVID-19 crisis continues across Europe. Italy recorded its biggest daily leap in fatalities. All up, the death toll now stands at over 9,000.
Certainly, this is an extraordinary situation that took us by surprise. We didn't expect a situation like this that would last for so long and be so dramatic.
To an empty St. Peter's Square, the Pope called for global solidarity. In Spain, funerals have been cut down to 2 mourners only. Both Italy and Spain have called on the EU to do more to release funds to help combat the virus, its strain on the economic stability of nations growing every day. Linton Besser, ABC News.
There are fears tonight that the world's biggest lockdown in India could leave millions of the poor to starve. With transport now shut down and most industries shuttered, some people are being forced to walk hundreds of kilometres in search of work and food. South Asia correspondent James Oaten reports.
Thousands of working poor in India have flooded state borders, desperate to break through and reach home. Many are trekking long distances without food or water.
For 2 days, the ration guys wouldn't give us any food, and we just had to go hungry.
In India, millions sleep wherever they can find work. With most industries shut down, the working poor lost their income and their bed. These men told me they're walking 240 kilometres to get home.
There is no transport available now. I don't have any money left. Food is expensive around here, so that's why I'm walking back home.
Those left behind have been crowding homeless shelters. Some have been running out of food. When the ABC drove past one such shelter, dozens of men had spilled out onto the street, some trying to pull over passing motorists.
People are worried about how to survive and how to reach a home and where to sleep.
Police have been captured using brute force to enact the lockdown. Some have even forced perceived curfew breakers into degrading acts. This uni student took his own action to help get the right messaging through to the poor.
We should take care for our health.
The government has announced an assistance package that's designed to keep the poor fed. But with an economy that's been underperforming for years and now stopped in its tracks, there's concern many more will be added to the millions of homeless and working poor.
The immediate situation could lead to more infections where it'll be hard to detect and contain. James Oaten, ABC News, New Delhi.
Stepping away briefly now from coronavirus, One Adelaide midwife is playing a key role in supporting the births of more than 1 million babies in Cambodia. Her charity's been crucial in that country where a lack of access to health services can make childbirth a risky process.
Born with her stomach on the outside of her body, this Cambodian baby girl would not have survived without intervention by the 2H Project, a charity that focuses on maternal health for the most vulnerable and marginalised populations.
Over probably about 9 years, we upskilled and trained just over 4,000 traditional birth attendants across Cambodia.
It's a cause close to the heart of the charity's founder, Kate Taylor.
My first birth, if I actually lived in a low-resource country, I possibly would have died. I hemorrhaged.
Maternal mortality is a serious public health issue in Cambodia, and many deaths are preventable.
In Cambodia, the focus is if you can save the mum, when the baby will survive. So the focus, is very different to well-resourced countries because, we have an option.
With a team of volunteers, the midwife is improving access to antenatal care services by teaching birth attendants.
We thought if we can work with the grassroots women and we can educate them and talk them about normal early warning signs when they had to refer, that would be able to, help change that maternal mortality rate.
The project has so far supported over 1 million births and plans to expand its services beyond Cambodia's borders.
We'd love to have a footprint on every country if we can. That would be great.
To ensure no woman dies bringing new life into the world. Natasha Kalios, ABC News, Adelaide.
Well, as we now find ourselves confined to our homes, we're relying on delivery services to get us what we need. Restaurants and cafes that can't serve sit-down meals are turning that produce into food boxes for the public to ensure nothing goes to waste. Margaret Paul reports.
Maddie Ewers and Tom Fairman are doing their weekly shop. They've been trying to avoid the mayhem of supermarket shopping.
Well, I suppose the fact that people are lining up so much and there seems to be a bit of a, people sort of jumping over one another to try and get things, and it's just not a particularly great feel, I think, around supermarkets at the moment.
This is the first time they've got their groceries from their local cafe.
Well, firstly, there's excellent produce and we want to support the business here.
This business was a thriving cafe with nearly 50 staff pumping out meals for diners. But now the cafe's closed, they've turned some of that produce into boxes.
We're really just trying to obviously get a little bit of money to support the staff that is still remaining and also to support the producers.
They sold out their first run of 20 boxes within hours and plan to expand next week.
One of the best things the only good thing about it is actually how, our staff and the suppliers, the producers, they've really sort of rallied around us and supported us through this.
One of those suppliers is Bird Eggs in Seymour, which sells eggs to hundreds of cafes and restaurants.
Within the space of 10 days, we saw almost 100% of trading venues close or be heavily restricted.
They're now delivering directly to people at home.
The response has been incredible. We were able to deliver to 70 individual homes in the first week.
As people adapt to staying at home, many businesses are adapting too. Traditional bricks and mortar businesses are moving to deliveries.
We're doing several batches of deliveries per day.
Even more reason to just stay home. Margaret Paul, ABC News, Melbourne.
The racing industry is trying to ride out the coronavirus crisis, even if more physical distancing restrictions are imposed. This week, racing was briefly suspended as officials waited for what turned out to be a negative COVID-19 test for jockey Mark Zahra. Catherine Murphy reports.
It's the sole sports survivor of COVID-19.
Set now, gates are back and they're off.
But things have changed. Trackside Fashion has a new accessory.
OK, we've got the rubber gloves and we're all sorted.
With no one watching from the stands, it's not just the horses enjoying a gallop. some made the most of the wide-open spaces.
Chris Waller and Charlie Duckworth going about their normal Saturday morning preparation.
And presenters are attempting to provide broadcast quality commentary from home. Unfortunately, no one told Bruce McAvaney's dog.
I'm not surprised about Finchy, that's for a start. And there's Frankie, she's off. So.
Strict health checks were put in place as the industry desperately tries to stay alive during the crisis.
It's not a contact sport. I mean, some people might say, well, the jockeys are very close to one another at the barrier, but generally speaking, there is a distance.
The care of a horse naturally create social distancing. You don't crowd around a horse when you are caring for it.
This week's temporary shutdown while waiting on jockey Mark Zara's test for coronavirus was a grim reminder that racing is just one confirmed case away from cancellation.
We know we're hanging by a bit of a thread, we understand that.
But shutdown or not, horses still need to be cared for.
We couldn't just turn off anyway. We can't just simply ignore the horse.
The industry is determined to find a way to persist, even if further community restrictions are imposed.
We have a huge array of quite draconian protocols now in place to ensure separation and to hit those biosecurity requirements.
Today, Zara was back in the saddle in Bendigo, putting his mount Masseuse to the test. After a week where his negative test was the best news of all. Catherine Murphy, ABC News, Melbourne.
He's in a stable condition. AFL Players Association boss Paul Marsh says pay cuts could be here to stay as the league attempts to plan for life after coronavirus. The players have agreed to take a 50% pay cut. If matches don't resume, their pay will drop to 30%. AFL CEO Gillon McLachlan is taking the same cut as the players.
If the industry is going backwards, the players understand that they'll go backwards with it. You know, that's always been an understanding.
The season is suspended until May 31st. Well, the need for spatial distancing has scuppered many a plan for group birthday celebrations this weekend, but a newly minted 5-year-old from Footscray was able to feel the love today from a safe distance, of course. Max Joseph was treated to a surprise driveway party with friends driving past with balloons, signs, songs and toots of the horn. Even the neighbouring fire brigade rallied to make him feel special.
Happy birthday, dear Maxie. Happy birthday to you.
Max's mum Susie had put the call out on Facebook to help celebrate his birthday and says they were both overwhelmed by the kindness and love and chocolates shown to them and thrown to them. Happy birthday from us too, Max. Now to the weather, and it was a glorious day to see outside your window. No real rain to speak of overnight, and minimum temperatures were generally cool to mild. It was dry, warm and sunny across the state today, with moderate northerly winds and afternoon sea breezes along the coast. Melbourne reached its top of 27.5 at around 4 this afternoon. Outside, it hasn't dropped back that much. Interstate today, there were showers in Sydney and Brisbane. It was sunny in Hobart and mostly sunny in Perth, Adelaide and Darwin. The satellite image shows the thunderstorm activity over the far north and cloud over the southwest and southeast of the country. A cold front and low pressure trough will enter Western Victoria tomorrow night and reach central areas at night. And the front will move to the southeast on Monday, with the low persisting in the northeast. Showers are expected in most states tomorrow, except WA. For the capital cities, it'll be sunny in Darwin, partly cloudy in Perth and Adelaide. Back home, it's all going to change tomorrow. Warm and dry at first, with showers and storms moving in from the west during the morning. There'll be thunderstorms, locally severe, particularly over central and northeast areas, with damaging winds, large hail and heavy rain possible. Now that change will reach East Gippsland later in the day or at night. On the bays, 30-knot northerlies in the morning will tend north to northwesterly in the afternoon, shifting west to northwesterly and easing to 15 knots later. Waves will be under 2 metres. And there's a strong wind warning for most Victorian coastal areas. So Sunday in Melbourne will be partly cloudy and humid, with showers and storms developing in the afternoon. A top of 25 down to 19 tonight. Looking at the week ahead, the showers will go into Monday and 21. Back to mostly sunny conditions on Tuesday and Wednesday, 22 and 23. Wednesday mostly sunny and 23. Before the showers return on Thursday, 22, and they settle in for a few days. And that's it for tonight's bulletin. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow night from 7. Until then, have a lovely evening.